I'm Heather Penczak, Director of Innovation with Education Systems Center, or Ed Systems, and I'll give a bit of a preview of who we are here in a moment, but we are going to spend the time today doing an overview of the Career Development Experience Toolkit. This has been around and published for many years. I hear about it in different spaces, how people are using it, but I also often hear, what is the Career Development Experience Toolkit, when I've brought it up as a resource for folks. So really wanted to take the time to just go through the toolkit and the resources and answer questions that you all have. So just let's go ahead and dig in. I will start here a bit, like I said, with who is Ed Systems, what are we doing here in this IWIN, Illinois Work-Based Learning Innovation Network space. We are a policy and program implementation center. We are based within Northern Illinois University as part of their division of outreach. We've been here since 2012 when we were founded, and our real goal here is this piece about helping create a world where students have clear, unambiguous paths to college and career opportunities that equip them for meaningful participation in a global economy. And that can show up in a lot of ways, both through pathways work, work-based learning work, through really thinking about data, both at the qualitative and quantitative aspect, and really identifying and scaling those innovative practices so that all learners can succeed in college and careers. And that's where a space like IWIN really comes into that. A lot of what we're doing within this space is lifting up those innovative practices, sharing resources, and helping think through what are those targeted approaches as some students are really accessing and doing well in work-based learning, and where other students might need some more support, targeted recruitment, and pieces there. And we do have these kind of 4 guiding principles that shape our work. So really prioritizing that equity piece, thinking about those historically marginalized learners. Who are those students who aren't quite accessing work-based learning at the same level as other students are? And how do we really center them within our efforts? But we do a lot of alignment across secondary, post-secondary, and workforce systems. Again, really thinking through what are those seamless transitions? How do we bring all the stakeholders to the table and design experiences, implement experiences that really do help on that unambiguous path? It shouldn't be so hard to get from secondary to post-secondary, but we can do a lot to inform students at the secondary and post-secondary levels they transition to career. We do also work bidirectionally, so we work at both the state level. This network here is a statewide network. We also have national folks who frequently join us, but we do a lot of local work as well, providing technical assistance and guidance on work-based learning, pathways, data, Illinois policy approaches all throughout the state here of Illinois. And so across our portfolio, we really do ensure kind of having that state and that local perspective, that our policies are always grounded in practice and our practices are informed by evidence, and that ultimately the impact is measured and sustained. So we do encourage you to check out our website. There's a lot of stuff on there, including IWIN, but we really are kind of having those projects focusing on our areas of practices, and then these services, what we see is really serving the field. And so where I'll move us in here then too is IWIN, what you're all here for today. So IWIN is something that is facilitated through Ed Systems, and you can see builds on a lot of those ways that we work in our areas of practice. So really spending this time highlighting and exploring innovative models for work-based learning. If you've been to IWIN before, we have lots of communities who come on and they share all the weeds and the ins and outs of their models for how they implement work-based learning all across the continuum, from career exploration to these more intensive career development experiences. But we also have a lot of roundtable discussions that we've launched, to not just through those community presentations, but also in those roundtable discussions to say, here's a common kind of question or challenge, something that communities are grappling with, and how can we come together and talk about, both understanding that we're all kind of having the same challenges and we're not alone in those, but also sharing where we've had those real insights and successes and resources. So a lot of IWIN is really building connections among communities. It's one of my favorite things just to hear how people have connected, even within the chat through an IWIN session, and how they're working together to collaborate. I know that often within work-based learning spaces, people are working in a silo. You might be the only person who's managing all the components of work-based learning. You might have a whole team. So IWIN is really here to help with that capacity too, and share resources and share learnings so that you don't have to feel like you're working so alone. And again, we engage in a lot of those conversations within those roundtables, also working closely to think about, what are policy changes or support systems. All kinds of things are bubbling up throughout these iWin conversations. If you haven't checked it out before, we do have a resource hub and we have a newsletter. If you're here today, you're going to get subscribed to the newsletter. Feel free to unsubscribe if you want, but we don't send out a lot of newsletters. We really do kind of keep them impactful and with relevant information for you all. And I also, as a note, I will be sending out this slide deck and all the links and stuff and the recording to you after this webinar. Let's dig in. So would love if you could just take a moment to introduce yourself. I see a lot of new names on here, which is really exciting. So if you could share your name, your role, your organization, and if you have any questions top of mind for you, we're going to do a couple of quick polls to understand this to you. But if you have any particular questions about career development experiences in general or about the toolkit, please go ahead and pop those in the chat. And if I'm not already planning to cover them, I'll make sure to take a look at that and really make sure that I cover that as I'm doing this overview here. If you're also like, what is the toolkit? What is a career development experience? That is a fair question. We are going to spend some time doing that. So in today's discussion, I'm going to just provide a brief kind of overview of what is a career development experience and the definition there and a bit of the background. But we're also going to spend a good chunk of time actually exploring that toolkit. So what are the different resources, templates, guidance included within? I'll also talk through a bit, the toolkit is a lot. Like it's one of those things where you have a lot of resources and that's great, but you don't really know where to start with all of it. I'll talk through some strategies for effective implementation with that toolkit. I'll share a bit more about some community-based models and proven practices for those career development experiences. And then I'll just have some prompts and kind of other resources for you too to think about what's next. I've learned all about this toolkit. What do I actually do with this? I'm going to launch a quick poll here before we actually dig in. And I just want to know your familiarity with CDEs, career development experiences. So we have a mix. We seem to have people who've really heard the term, but that's about it. We've got an expert in here. Anybody want to show yourself as the expert? I'll hand it to you. And then a lot of people too who are pretty familiar, they could explain it to somebody if they needed to. A bit of kind of framework and policy background for these CDEs. And I'm going to start saying CDEs instead of career development experiences because it is a mouthful. But it was statutorily defined in the Post-Secondary and Workforce Readiness Act. It's also included in our Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary, and it's part of our broader work-based learning continuum here in Illinois. Those of you who are engaged with and familiar with those college and career pathway endorsements, it is a required component of that, but it's also included in our Illinois' Every Student Succeeds Act as a college and career readiness indicator. So just to give some context here that this isn't just like a term that came out of nowhere, right? This really is something that's grounded in policy. It's embedded in a variety of frameworks and legislation here within Illinois. And again, I'm going to share this presentation after the webinar with the recording, which will have all the links to these pieces. But I'm not going to kind of dig into what each of these component parts are right now. We're going to stay focused on that career development experience. But as I mentioned, it is within our broader kind of work-based learning continuum. So again, there'll be a link here to our Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary, which has all of these component parts defined within it, along with other career pathways terminology. But you can see this comes after a host of experiences. So when we talk about a continuum and we talk about best practices and work-based learning, before a person would engage in a career development experience, they would have engaged in these earlier parts of the continuum. Awareness, they took some surveys or watched videos about different careers, did some reflecting, career exploration, they had a guest speaker, they did a jobs shadow, they toured a site, they had that real direct engagement with industry professionals to learn about the different occupations within a field. And they've completed team-based challenges. So they've worked as a team of students, they've worked with an industry mentor, and they've really addressed an authentic problem that they would have to solve in that career in the real world. And so those things have really set them up then to now engage in a career development experience, which after that, moving into even more intensive experiences like an apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, registered apprenticeship, the career development experience can be a really good kind of short term, and I'll do the definition here right after this, a short term kind of intensive experiences that really helps a person know, like, yes, I still want to keep pursuing this, or I don't know about this anymore. Maybe I want to shift paths here before they would really commit to a longer term experience like an apprenticeship. I often tell the story of I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I had an internship for the summer in college at the Shedd Aquarium here in downtown Chicago, and I realized quickly that I didn't want to interact with fish. And so marine biology was not going to be the path for me, but it was a little late to be doing that, junior year of college. But that was that kind of short-term summer experience that really grounded my thinking. I had been enjoying my classes, and all the content, and then I actually did the work and was quickly reflecting that it was not the path for me. So this is a screenshot here of the definition that's within the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary. I know the wording is small on here. Can put this link here in the chat in just a moment, but I'll call out a few things here when you're thinking about that career development experience. The first one is that there should either be, school credit provided or compensation provided, or both, right? You can do credit, compensation, or both for the students' work hours for that experience. The workplace should be authentic. There should be, timekeeping. There should really be a reinforcement of those essential and technical employability skills, and collaborating too with your employer partners about which essential skills will be covered, which technical skills will be covered during that experience. There's feedback given to the student. And then a key one here are these hours. So when I was saying short term before for a career development experience, you're really looking at a total of 60 hours. This could be broken apart across 2 experience, but no experience would be less than 20 hours. So you could do a 20-hour CDE and a 40-hour CDE. You could do 2 30-hour CDEs, but you couldn't do a CDE that's less than 20 hours. So there's some communities who might break this apart within a spring break or a summer, or maybe there's like a winter break component or certain times of the year. But you can get kind of creative here. And I know too with clinicals, a lot of people have really worked within their clinical and those pathways to expand those. They're typically about 40, 45 hours, expanding those a bit to get to that full 60 hours. So there's a lot of existing things you can build on, but that hours component is a big piece of it. Also thinking too, this could be based in the school district. So one of the pieces I'll share as a high quality model are school districts who are offering in-house opportunities, and not just within the education pathway, but within marketing, accounting, IT. More and more schools are starting to have conversation with their school nurses and thinking about kind of like a healthcare pathway, in-house CDE that they can do. But really, again, making sure that whoever that supervisor is for that in-house, that school district experience, is still serving that role as an industry mentor, as a supervisor. But also you can be thinking about, fully virtual, remote, hybrid working conditions. I think we've all kind of seen over the years that more and more jobs have this kind of hybrid or fully remote work schedule to them. And so the better we can really make that authentic for students, if they're going into a field that is highly hybrid or mostly virtual, gaining those skills and how to interact within that way is a big deal. I know my first kind of time having to do meetings on Zoom and webinars on Zoom and even interviewing on Zoom. I hear more and more that there's interviews on Zoom that are happening. We do our initial interviews for Ed Systems on Zoom. Like, that's a real skill to be able to accomplish, especially as a young person kind of first making your way into the working world here. The next thing that we're going to dig into is the actual toolkit. And so I'm going to launch another poll here to know both your familiarity with the toolkit, but would also appreciate if you can share in the chat, those of you especially who have expressed that you're very familiar with CDEs, that you could even teach a masterclass in it. If you could just share some pieces about how you've used the toolkit before, share as many details as you want, a quick few words, that would be really helpful. And then as we kind of share those results, so people can start to get a sense of how the toolkit's been used before we fully dig in. Again, it looks like a lot of people, this is pretty new, or you've heard of it but haven't explored, so you are in the right place. Would love to see some details here on how people have used it. Used it for some training, definitions and graphics, a resource for the school district. Well, let's dig into the toolkit and really spend some time. The toolkit purpose, structure, when this was first created, we had put out the career development experience definition. More and more people were engaging in thinking through their college and career pathway endorsements and where they would incorporate CDEs within that. And so this toolkit has really been designed for a wide range of users. So if you're totally new to offering a CDE, if you've been offering these for multiple years and you're looking for ways to enhance it, you can pick and pull from different parts of this toolkit to guide your work. It is organized by the stage of implementation. So again, if you're just starting and you're just trying to think through student and partner recruitment, you can kind of lean into that area. If you're trying to think better about how the students and mentors are checking in with each other during the experience, you can lean into that area. You can really go by the stage that works best for you. But all throughout, it was really important when we first put this together to have those customizable templates. A lot of the bandwidth of running a work-based learning program is just creating all these different documents. And so one thing I'll say to people every time I bring up this toolkit is if you're thinking about creating a document for your CDE or for even other work-based learning experiences, go to this toolkit, see if it already exists there. They're in both PDF and in Microsoft Word forms. You can download and you can adapt them however you want to. But there's also best practices and resources embedded throughout. There are a few accompanying resources to it. So this other one is a companion piece. So we had worked closely with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to think about some more kind of tangible guidance and resources for out-of-school youth, especially thinking about the 18 to 24-year-old population. And then this facilitation guide again. So what this one is it is a helpful guide to kind of take you through each of the sections. Excuse my scroll here. But it'll go through like first explore these essential components, do the summary, think about some of these questions. This facilitation guide could be a good piece for you as you're thinking about offering a professional development with your organization, as you're thinking about going through the toolkit for the first time. It is a lot of content. As I shared before, there's a lot of things on here. I think the full PDF document's like 113 pages, but we have it in website format, so that's a bit more digestible. But all these here are just additional pieces that we've built on to make the toolkit a bit more user-friendly. And again, also open to any suggestions about how to make this more user-friendly. Here's that resources bundle. So if you click into there, it will have a bit of this kind of language at the top, but the table of contents. So again, if you're thinking I need a more like reflection questions for my students, I'm trying to think through a site visit at my host. I would like my, what could a program agreement look like? I would very much look through this table of contents here, see if it exists within the toolkit, and then just take and pull from that. It can be a lot easier to kind of build from something than to start with a blank page of paper in front of you. And I know all these, AI language models have made a lot of this easier too, but the one thing I'll say about the toolkit is these templates have really very much been grounded in work that I've done managing a high school internship program, and also grounded in the best practices that communities at both the secondary and post-secondary level have shared. So it very much is capturing all those best practices and putting them into a template. I'm going to click into the website here in just a moment, but just want to show you here before I kind of click in there. It is organized again by section, so you can pull like this piece, would just pull you to that part of the PDF. There's drop downs within each that will include different templates and resources here for you as well. So what I'm going to do here is actually explore some resources. And so I'm going to be kind of clicking into the different parts of the toolkit, but I have them all linked here. I just want to have those ready for you, but I want to actually get into the toolkit. So as you get to this page, you'll see that you have all the resources here at the top. You have the full toolkit. If you are one of those people who likes to print and just read a document in its entirety, this is the document for you. I don't necessarily suggest it, but we all have different styles. So if it's something you want to keep and have on hand, but the website is going to be the area that stays the most updated. As you scroll down, that definition will be there right away for you. We keep this updated to reflect what's in the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary. And again, here, downloading that full toolkit or looking at that bundle of resources too. So within each section, I'm like getting started where I mentioned if you just want to go here and think about this part first, or you want to go to, how do I think about my staff and how do I do professional development? You can go there. Where I'm going to dig in a bit is on this host outreach section. And so here where I'll note, if you click on this, it takes you just to that PDF part. So you can see that this is a 9-page PDF. So again, if you're running a training or you're just trying to engage in some conversations with your team, this is something you could even print, 9 pages and kind of walk through, mark up, and have as a real starting point for conversations with your team instead of having to download the whole entire toolkit. But then within there, you can think about some different resources. And again, within each section, it's kind of organized by a subsection. Host is really just a general term that we use when you're thinking about your partners, whether it's an employer, a community-based organization, another school that you might be working with, both your college or your high school. And so for the engagement, I'm just going to kind of click through the ones that people most ask me for and I most share. There's this resource, participant task examples by endorsement area. If you click on this one, and again, you have all kinds of, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, who can do this for you now too. I'll just note here again that these pieces that are listed, these task examples, and I'll zoom in a bit here. These are all things that I have heard people have shared are tasks that they have students at both the high school and the college level doing as part of their CDEs. So these are tested tasks. And these again are, if a student does an arts and communication CDE, they're not going to do all of these tasks within that 60 hours. That would be a really intense CDE. But what these tasks do is they set up a space for you to have a conversation with a partner who's interested in hosting a student within that pathway to say, okay, here are some examples of things they could do. Which of these things do you think that your organization could offer? And then how could we kind of develop and customize the CDE around that? I see a quick question about if a student does a career exploration by job shadowing for 10 hours, then they're asked to stay on. Could you move that to part of the CDE? Yeah, so job shadows, Kathy, to that question, I think it would depend on the job shadow, right? And I know there's some job shadows that really are intentional about the tasks and the pieces that students are engaged in. So I would think if they're doing a pretty intentional task and working on something and getting mentorship, and then they're moving on to complete the part of that CDE, that seems almost like some good career exploration and mentorship, almost a bit of an interview before they're moving on. If they work more than 60 hours, that's just great. The state's really just going to expect that you have at least that 60 hours. Another one in here that I'm going to call out in terms of like forming host partnerships, or sorry, I think this is in the host information. A lot of people have questions about like what information should I even ask about a partner? And so there's a template here about the host profile. I'm going to pull up the PDF just because it's easier when sharing my screen, but there is a Word form version of this. So you could download the Word and you could add your own logo, you could add some of your other language, you could change pieces in here. And so there's just different questions on here that in my experience and the experiences that I've heard from other communities are really helpful things to know right away from a partner before you have a student going in there. This kind of host profile is also something that's really helpful for you to give to students before they start their experience so they can see what is the dress code, what is the environment like. One of the questions, for example, that I have found really helpful, so what are the different kind of clusters that student might work in. But this is the question that I think, we kind of know, but don't really explicitly know sometimes before we place a student is how are they going to be working? Are they mostly going to be independent with minimal oversight? Are they going to be independent sometimes and have close supervision for others? or are they working closely with the staff at all times? Understanding that is really helpful and really valuable when you're thinking about student placement. And because it might be that, a student is really interested in finance, but if that site is going to have them working independently with minimal guidance the whole time, and you know that that's a student who needs a bit more support, that might not be the best placement for them, even if it is aligned with their career interest area, and with the pathway and the courses that they've done. So maybe you can think about a different finance site for them. Placement is it can be a really complex process, but the more that you have this kind of information about partners, the better you can make that match between students and partners and really make sure that they have a high quality experience on both sides for both students and for your partners. So that's there as a resource, and questions that you can ask. Again, there is a Word version of it that would download, and then you can edit that as you would like. And again, I'm just going to keep doing a show and tell here, but I'm watching the chat as you all have any questions, happy to answer them. Within onboarding, let's see, one of the things that people ask for a lot, kind of similar to that kind of host profile, is also thinking for the students. How do I really, for my participants who are going to be within the CDE, how do I outline and make sure it's really clear to them what all the expectations are for the program? So this is something that's really good, both for the participants themselves, but also things that you would want to share, especially at the high school level, that you'd want to share with the family. So they're also understanding the expectations of their student, of their learner as they're going into this experience. And so, it just calls out all these different components to make sure when you're thinking through how are you putting together your guide, these would be the things that you would want to include on there to make things really clear to the participants for the CDE. And so it just gives you some prompts on there, includes all those essential employability skills, attendance, grading if it's applicable, payroll, and some pieces there. So that's something I know I'll tend to get some questions about. There's also on the same end a guidebook for hosts. So similar, and again, they're both in PDF and Word, just pulling these up because it's a bit easier. For host two, thinking through what are all the things that I need to say to this partner who's about to host one of my students. And so this has all those pieces there too to prompt and guide you on what are the things that you should include within that kind of guidebook for hosts. So you can look through here, thinking about first and last day. There's some things in here that seem obvious, but sometimes we forget the obvious because we're kind of caught up in some other weeds. And so it really just keeps you thinking through all the different parts that an organization is going to have to know in order to really work well with those students and give them a meaningful experience, and for them to feel that they have the information to then host an experience. And this is something too, I hear often that the person at the organization who says yes to hosting the CDE is typically not the person who actually ends up being the mentor or supervisor of that student. And so this kind of a guidebook is something that's really helpful to be able to share with that person who may have been voluntold to do something, might be hearing for the first day as the student is arriving, that this is what they're doing. We hope that that doesn't happen. Encourage you to do everything in your power to make sure that you get connected with that supervisor or mentor before the first day, but we know these things happen. This guidebook can be a really helpful resource to lay all of that content out and not have real confusion about all of that. So you can see here, just trying to give you kind of a sampling of everything that we include. One of the pieces too, I get questions a lot about our check-in meeting. So what should a student and their mentor / supervisor be talking about when they're actually at the CDE? And so this is something that I put together based on, again, conversations that I used to have or encourage my employer partners and students to have, and also other ones that I've seen from different models throughout Illinois and also nationally. But, reflecting on the task, reflecting on the skills, but also just doing some general time for reflection. I think we have to kind of consistently remember that the partners that we're working with may or may not have been trained in youth development. So how do we give them as much prompts and materials that they can have in order to really think about coaching and supporting a learner? I mean, if we even think about management training within companies, like people are often promoted to a manager and not necessarily there's capacity for manager training. So how do we also have to set up some of those guardrails so that we are also helping coach and give resources and how to kind of manage and coach and work with their participant. And then the last one I'll just kind of pull up here too is for site visits. So this is another one that I'll frequently get questions about and thinking through like, well, what is a good site visit? How do I set that up well? What am I supposed to be doing and talking about at a site visit? So there's some guidance here, but also again, you could download this into a Word document, be taking this with you to be taking notes on. Sending these questions in advance can be really helpful. Again, I'll kind of zoom in a bit here. And always checking in too on those essential employability competencies. And I have resources for this too if you're looking for, curriculum or skills assessments for these. We worked closely with a project called GPeak, and so we have a lot of those resources too. Anything else before I kind of keep moving that you all would like to see in the toolkit? Questions you have as you're maybe clicking through in this? Oh yeah, so good question about what if employers ask what they should do with a student if there isn't enough work on one of the days? Something that I will highly suggest is that, students might have their daily tasks, things that they're working on, but there should always be some sort of independent project that they have, depending on the site, that might be some research that they're doing. I know there's, if you even look back at this task list up here, you can look at some of these things too about which of these could be some more long-term things that, maybe isn't, that employer doesn't need it absolutely as part of that CDE, but if a student were able to get some work done on there, that would be a really helpful thing from them. Like this one, thinking about what are their needs in the community for interests, surveys, products. Let's see, even like thinking about like archiving past things. There's some stuff that needs to be done, but someone hasn't had capacity for it yet, but it would still be a great learning experience for students. I would always encourage that there's at least like one kind of independent, it's not a high stakes project, whether the student really gets it done or not, right? They should still expect to do it with quality, but would really make sure they have that independent project. Because we all know I posted interns, and there are some days when I think I'm going to be there, and then I'm getting pulled into a different meeting, and I'm not able to kind of, assign the tasks as I want to that day. But my intern knows that they have something else that they can be working on. Anything else or other questions? Thank you, Kathy. Keep putting them in there. So as you're thinking about the toolkit and you're thinking like, wow, there's a lot of great stuff on there. Or if you're like, wow, they're missing half the things I need. I would love to know if it's missing half the things you need, because we could definitely do some crowdsourcing or development of templates to put those on there. So as you're digging into this, if you see anything missing, please reach out. But when you're thinking about actually implementing and using this toolkit, first, as I've said, like really think about what is the area of need for your CDE. Is there a certain component of it that you'd really like to enhance? Focus on that section or those couple of sections to start. Looking at the whole thing is just daunting. Adapt those to fit your context. Put your new logos on it, put different language in there, add questions that you have found really helpful that aren't currently included. But also thinking through, sharing these with industry partners, sharing these with your team. I wouldn't just send them the link to the toolkit, right? If you're feeling overwhelmed by everything in the toolkit, they're going to feel overwhelmed by everything in the toolkit. But a lot of those resources and pieces, as you look through those, could be really good starting points for conversation. Again, it's so much easier to critique something and to adjust it rather than starting with a blank slate in front of you. So even that, host guidebook, that might be something you're going through with your team and you're saying, does this have all the things really in it that we need? What else would we add here? And then, if you have an employer partner who's been a really great partner in this work, sharing the guidebook with them and say, does this make sense to you? Or what else would you like to see in this guidebook? Those kinds of resources can be really helpful as a conversation starter, rather than saying, okay, what should we put in our guidebook? I'm going to just kind of show here some different examples of community-based models and then some best practices that I've seen and know within a CDE. And so 3 kind of different examples here, and each of these will link to that example. Again, I'll be sending this all in a follow-up. But in Northern Kane County, they've done some really incredible work to think about rotational internships. You do hear, from partners sometimes that they're like 60 hours. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do for 60 hours, right? But if you do think about, especially in a hospital system where you have a variety of occupations that the student could learn about, doing maybe a 20-20-20 kind of rotational internship for them to really engage with the different departments, get a feel for what that looks like. But Northern Kane County has also really done a lot of work in developing those employer-facing resources and working closely with their employers to get that language right and get that really clear to them. Naperville, and then also Cherry Creek out of Colorado, they were on iWin last year and they shared a lot about their in-house CDEs that they do. So again, I know a lot of schools will do this within their education pathway, especially those unit districts having students do their CDEs within an elementary school within the district, but also thinking about, districts are major employers. You have accounting departments, you have HVAC departments. And in Cherry Creek, they have a pretty robust transportation CDE that they do. They actually have even moved that into an apprenticeship model. And that student has actually taken over a retired person within their bus barn. So that's been a great piece for them as they're thinking about that pipeline. But marketing, accounting, IT, beyond just kind of that, computer repair, but taking students through FERPA and making sure they understand, student privacy when they're looking at reports. There's a lot of really great things you can do in-house, especially when you're thinking about transportation needs for students. In Boone County, I also want to lift this one up, thinking about District 100 and working with different employers in manufacturing. They had a variety of summer internships that they did, and so you can see the different ways that those employers in manufacturing describe the kind of job description and tasks that the students are going to do, and they have both student and employer-facing resources for you. And if you're looking for a particular type of CDE, share it in the chat or email me later or dig in around on the iWin Resource Hub. Actually, I can show you that here quickly. If you're in iWin and you are looking for, and I'll just drop this in the chat too, and you're looking for a particular, resource, you can go to the iWin Resource Library. And you can say, if it's a model or a resource, but you can also say, I'm looking for a career development experience, and I'm looking for in health sciences and technology. And all the different examples that we currently have on iWin will pop up for that. Again, these are really helpful things similar to what I'm saying about the toolkit, that you could take this as a conversation starting point. So these rotational internships are what Barnes Jewish Hospital is doing. You could share that with an interested employer partner and say, what do you think about this model? Could we do something similar? Or what would you adjust here? These, again, you might not do it exactly as these communities are, but you could use that as a starting point for conversations. When I've experienced and kind of managed internships, when I've seen kind of really high quality internships, there's a lot of things, and I'll share, we have kind of a high quality criteria resource document too that has additional details here. But these are kind of the 6 things that I really see and the communities have seen as being really helpful. One, that there's multiple opportunities for reflection. So depending on the length of your CDE, if you can do a pre, a mid, and a post kind of assessment and reflection, that can kind of help you track, progress and growth and address any areas of need along the way. But this really should be an opportunity for the student to be thinking about, like, how is this helping me continue to think about next steps? How am I, showing up well? Where are the areas I need to improve? To kind of address any challenges too head on before they become a bigger deal within that CDE. But also for the partner, how are they showing up as a mentor? What supports do they need? And that goes into, these partners really do need to be both mentor and supervisor. So yes, they are prescribing tasks to that participant, and that student should be getting those things done with quality and getting coaching if they're struggling with it. But they are also a mentor. They are here to help coach and provide information, provide additional connections. The more that they can connect that learner with people within the organization, just helps continue to build that social capital. And then the tasks should be intentional. They should reinforce essential skills that are cross-cutting, would be helpful wherever you work. They should also address those technical skills that are specific to that industry. Students shouldn't be doing kind of like rudimentary work every so often. They might, right? Maybe that's kind of what part of the job is, and they have to understand some of that, but they shouldn't be, the common thing you hear is filing papers and getting coffee, right? They really should understand what it is to work within that occupation and being exposed to that. And I think often about internships as being, or CDEs, right, as being very 50-50. So 50% of it is, that student is providing task, they're providing some sort of deliverable to that partner as part of their work. But really 50% of it is that they're learning. So they're learning about things, they're getting coached on areas they're struggling with. They are not just necessarily another employee. They really are someone who needs to understand the industry to help understand their next steps and gain the certifications that they need to pursue apprenticeships, post-secondary degrees, right? Clear points of contact. This is, I know, trickier depending on how big your team is. If you are a team of one, you are the clear point of contact for everybody. But this just does need to be clear, especially if you have a bigger team. But even as a single team, single person team, like how are you really communicating with your partners, with your students, with your, teachers you might be engaging with, like what is that point of contact, how and where and who should you be reaching out to? That can solve all kinds of problems before they start, because people get really frustrated if they're reaching out to the wrong people and not getting the answers and support that they need. And also this, like students are engaged as a valuable asset. So I shared that continuum earlier. If a student is participating in a CDE, then they've done, in best practices, they've done all kinds of other work-based learning before that. If they're doing a CDE, it's also very likely that they've taken career focus, early college credit coursework. These are people who do know things, right? They have new perspectives on things. They're excited about things. This is not like an empty vessel who doesn't know anything when they're showing up to a CDE. Like we really need to see students for that experience and the fresh perspective that they bring. I'm already being trained constantly on all kinds of things like AI for sure, and just other ways of doing things that, I've gotten stuck in my own ways too here. And also, this piece about the CDE being relevant and really informing the next step. So that placement piece really comes in here, right? It should be connected to that kind of college and career interest area. It should be building on things that they've done and kind of continuing them on a path. And they might get to the CDE and be like, you know what? I really thought things were going well. And now that I'm in here kind of working on my own, working with a team, I'm just not so sure. And that should really be a space, again, tied with those multiple opportunities for reflection that informs their next steps. And I would say too, when you think about those multiple opportunities for reflection, how are students being engaged to think about, with this experience, how would they respond to common interview questions? With this experience, what would they write in their resume or their cover letter? I would work with students who would be in a 10-month long internship program. And at the end, you'd be like, well, what did you do? Like, what do you think? And they would be like, oof, like, I don't know what I did. And, that was on me. That was on us too, to like, maybe our reflection, our opportunities for capturing that weren't as intentional as they could have been. So really thinking about how students can reflect and how they can use the CDE to inform next steps is crucial. just some next steps. You've heard a lot. There's a few additional resources for you. One of them being this design template. This is not anything that you would use to submit a CDE to the State Board of Education or community college, anybody. This is really just a template for you that you could work through on your own or with a team as you're thinking about all the different moving pieces of a CDE. It's by no means required for anything. It's just here for you as a design and a worksheet piece that you could, even print out, or you could upload it into Google and kind of work through. And then this is the other document I was mentioning. We worked with a statewide advisory committee of work-based learning stakeholders across Illinois and developed quality criteria for continuous improvement and equity all across the continuum. So from career awareness to these career development experiences, and also within the systems and processes. I have time, so I'm going to pull this up for just a moment. Just to show that there's a lot of helpful things in there. I'm not scrolling past stuff, but each of them has a page like this. So, career awareness, these are the high quality criteria, some student I can statements. And what I've heard people doing with their teams is kind of taking even just this piece of paper and saying, okay, if we look at this high quality criteria and we think about the current career awareness opportunities that we offer, where are we hitting the mark on some of these criteria? Where are we not really engaging in some of these criteria? And how do we maybe want to think about enhancing our experience so that we are actually being really intentional about that high quality criteria? We did write these, and there was a lot of back and forth conversations to make sure that these would be doable for a variety of contexts and communities and team sizes. If you're a person of one or a bigger team, some of these will be a stretch, these criteria, and they may be things that you might never quite get to, or might be a 5-year goal, right? But they're just there for you to be continuously thinking about, how do I improve? How do I make sure that I'm really getting access to those students who are most in need of accessing these experiences? And so that's another resource for you. So what can you do next? Spend some time reviewing the toolkit. There's a ton in there. Click through, read through it, reach out to me at all with any questions, look through those templates. Again, very much encourage you to look at that table of contents in the resource packet before you start creating anything. And then think about what your starting point is. There's that toolkit facilitation guide that can kind of help you assess where you're at. I'm sure as you're looking through this, you're like, oh yeah, maybe this during part, we're really thinking about engagement while they're actually at the partner. And then engage your team. So think about where there's some applicable pieces. Again, very much caution to not just send the whole link to your team and be like, check this out. Unless you have a team who's like, great, would love to check it out, go for it. But would very much think about what are some targeted pieces and components that you would share with them, or what resources, what templates would you want to talk through? And then as you're doing that, maybe sharing, hey, I got this from this CDE toolkit. If you want to check it out more, here's the link to that. Here is my email. Give you a moment to jot that down if you need it. Hopefully this has been a helpful overview of a really incredible resource. Thanks all.